When people think of reboots and legacy characters, they often like to think of modern, greedy executives wanting to cash in on popular franchises with their own hand in the pie, when, in reality, these things are not new. Universes being reset and characters being reinvented have been going on for an incredibly long time, so much so that people often forget certain characters originated as reboots, and that's what we're talking about today. Hello friendos and bendos, it's me Z, and the Silver Age of Comics is considered by many to be DC's first official reboot, as well as the origin point of some of DC's most popular and successful legacy characters of all time. In response to the diminishing popularity of many of their comics and characters in the mid-1950s, DC delved into their backlog of once popular heroes and remade them for the modern day, in a brand new continuity, fitting them into the era's writing sensibilities and the emerging popularity of sci-fi trends in the medium. Today, we'll be looking at and comparing 4 of these characters before and after the Silver Age reboot: The Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, and the Atom. For this video, I tried to look at all of these characters from the lens of an outsider, reading an equivalent amount of Golden and Silver Age stories, looking at the similarities and differences between the counterparts, and using just what I read to decide whether or not I found the new interpretations more or less compelling than the original versions. So, let's get started. In Flash Comics number 1, in a story written by Gardner Fox with art by Harry Lampert, we meet Jay Garrick, a college student whose friend Joan thinks he's wasting his incredible smarts and athletic body by not trying out to get a main spot on the football team. But while he fails the tryouts, Jay still has the backup of being a brilliant scientist, and one day in the school laboratory, Jay accidentally knocks over beakers filled with hard water, causing the room to fill with a strange gas that renders him unconscious. Waking up in the hospital, Jay finds out that the hard water vapors have given him incredible speed that he uses to become a football star and impress Joan. The two then graduate and end up going their separate ways, with Joan going to work for her dad as an assistant in nuclear studies and Jay becoming a college professor. On the side, Jay also decides to use his super speed for good, donning a costume and fighting criminals as the fastest man alive, the Flash. Jay and Joan eventually meet up again, with Joan asking Jay for help, knowing his super speed can help save her father, who's been kidnapped by evil scientists who want to take his research. Once again, becoming the Flash, Jay takes down the criminals and saves Joan's father, with Joan swearing to keep Jay's powers a secret. This is the origin of the Golden Age Flash, and while not anything special, it does provide a very effective jumping off point for further storytelling. It's a simple origin for a character who had a then pretty unique gimmick of only having one extremely good power. However, reading some stories after his origin, there really wasn't anything crazy or interesting. I'm 100% sure that they were for the time, but as a modern comic reader, I'm just so used to a lot of the tropes that were presented that I just found them okay. And honestly, a lot of this also applies to the Silver Age Flash. In Showcase number 4, written by Robert Kaniger with art by Carmen Infantino, we meet Barry Allen. Like Jay, Barry is also a scientist who gets in a lab accident that spills a bunch of chemicals and ends up giving him super speed. There are certain differences though, of course, such as Barry being a police scientist instead of a college professor, him getting struck by lightning and doused in the chemicals whereas Jay breathed in the chemicals vapors, and his love interest Iris being a reporter instead of a scientist like Joan. But, all in all, reading the first few stories of the Silver Age Flash felt no different from reading the Golden Age ones, and I'm of two minds of this. On one hand, it shows that the idea of the Flash was already rock solid, without much need of an update. But on the other hand, I feel like at least some more things should have been changed if they were going to explicitly make Barry Allen a different character, because in all honesty, he could have just been Jay Garrick. And yes, I know that in modern comics, there's much more to separate Barry and Jay than there were back then, but remember that I'm not looking at this from a modern lens. I'm looking at this from the perspective of someone whose only exposure to the Flash comics is these comics. And with that in mind, while I don't prefer one version over the other after my reading, that's because they're so similar. And because of this, I think I pretty much have to prefer the Golden Age Flash simply for being the first one. Okay, moving on, the rest of the characters I'll be talking about in this video have tons of differences between their two versions, the first of which being the Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott, first appearing in All-American Comics number 16 by writer Bill Finger and artist Martin O'Dell. Alan Scott is a railway engineer, whose company wins a bid over his rival Decker's company to help with railway construction. As revenge, Decker blows up the newly constructed railway as the train crosses over a chasm, killing everybody on board except Alan, who mysteriously survives. He shortly finds out why when his train lantern starts talking to him and tells him that it's made out of a magic, enchanted metal that came to Earth in a meteor hundreds of years ago that was eventually fashioned into a lantern. Alan survived because the lantern chose him as its champion, and it tells him to take a piece off of it and fashion it into a ring, so that he can access the metal's power without needing to carry the lantern everywhere, though he does need to recharge the ring with the lantern every 24 hours. So, Alan goes home, creates and puts on the ring, goes to Decker's house to kick his and his henchmen's asses, and as Decker sign a confession to blowing up the railway. Oh, and Decker then immediately dies of shock. At the end of the story, Alan then decides to continue using the ring and lantern to fight evil as a superhero Green Lantern, creating a costume with a design that he calls so bizarre that no one could ever forget him. In subsequent stories, Alan becomes a news reporter and gets a sidekick, the taxi driver Doiby Dickles, who, while he does speak in an incredibly annoying to read accent, is actually a really good and courageous fighter, and I like that about him. He and Golden Age Etta Candy would totally get along as fat comic relief sidekicks who are actually surprisingly competent. Now, the Silver Age Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, is completely different. He's an ace test pilot who gets transported to a crashed alien spaceship and finds Abin Sur, a dying alien who's a member of a space police force that uses Green Lanterns to charge their superpowered rings. The ring identified Hal as the most deserving candidate to be Abin Sur's successor, because he is honest and without fear, and Abin dies passing the ring and lantern on to Hal so that he can protect Earth. The other major character of the first few stories is Carol Ferris, who Hal's in love with, but she won't date him because she just so happens to be his boss. Now, like I said, unlike the Flash, the two eras of Green Lantern are extremely different. Alan Scott's lantern, while it fell to Earth from space, is mainly magical in nature compared to Hal's, whose lantern is firmly a piece of sci-fi technology. Their weaknesses are also completely different, as we find out that Alan's powers are unable to affect wood, and Hal Jordan's are unable to affect the color yellow. Despite all of these differences though, the two of them basically use their powers in the same way. They both use them to shoot lasers, telekinetically lift things, and phase through walls. The exact extent to what their powers are capable of are also very similarly vague, like Alan phases through walls by somehow going into the fourth dimension, while Hal is able to turn metal into water. It's insane. Anyway, their personalities are also super different. Being a Golden Age character, Alan's personality wasn't super well defined, but he certainly was presented as this calm and analytical type of guy. Hal, on the other hand, is confident and reckless and acts first and asks questions later. Their jobs and side characters are different too, which I also really like. Overall, I kind of have a hard time choosing which one I like more, purely based on these first few initial stories. On one hand, I think Alan's ring has a much more interesting origin, being both magic and space-based, but I prefer Hal's personality and costume. I also like Doiby as a sidekick, but Hal's romance drama is fun too. It's kind of the opposite of my problem with the Flashes. Whereas they were too similar for me to care, both Alan and Hal have so much going on for them that it makes me want to experience what both of them have to offer. So, for the only time in this video, my choice is actually going to be that I prefer both of the versions. I just can't put one above the other. They both are just so good. Also, did you know that Vandal Savage was originally an Alan Scott villain? I didn't, and not gonna lie, his first appearance in Green Lantern number 10 is my favorite comic that I read for this video. It's incredibly well plotted and paced, which completely shocked me because that's just not something I expect from this era. Like, not saying the Golden Age is bad or anything, just that I really don't normally see such genuinely really good and advanced storytelling in comics until like the late 50s, early 60s. It was really cool in my opinion. Hawkman is such a weird character because, if I'm being super honest, I barely know anyone who cares about him. He always seems to just be there in the Justice League stories as a roster filler, and before this video, I never really went out of my way to read Hawkman comics, but after reading both his Golden and Silver Age origins, I'm honestly really intrigued about the character, and actually have a very strong opinion on which version I prefer. Let's start with the Golden Age version of the character, who first appeared in Flash Comics number 1, written by Gardner Fox with art by Dennis Neville. In the story, we meet Carter Hall, researcher and collector of ancient artifacts, who gets delivered an ancient dagger that reveals to him that in a past life, he was an ancient Egyptian prince named Khufu. He and his wife Shiera were killed by the evil sorcerer Hath-Set, and all three of them were fated to reincarnate for the rest of time, destined to keep meeting over and over again in different lives. After regaining his memories, he then shortly meets the modern reincarnation of Shiera, and then witnesses a terror attack by the mad scientist Dr. Hastor, the modern reincarnation of Hath-Set. that. Deciding that he must stop Hastor's plans, Carter decides to don a set of armor from his collection, including a helmet modeled after a hawk, and wings made of the ninth metal, which has mysterious anti-gravity powers that allow him to fly. Becoming the Hawkman, he fights Hastor, who then kidnaps Shiera, and in retaliation, Hawkman straight up kills Hastor, who says that he will someday come back, and Carter knows this to be true. Now, I'm gonna tell you straight up, this is some of the stupidest shit I've ever read in quite a while, and I love it. I adore how many coincidences there are, and how some of them are because of the idea of fate, and others are just because the story wanted to add them in and didn't have enough time to flesh out the concepts. Like, Carter just so happens to have ancient wings that allow him to fly because they're made of a mysterious anti-gravity metal. Like, how long has he had these? Where did he get them from? How is he not famous for owning a pair of anti-gravity wings? None of this is explained, and it's kind of amazing. Moving on before I get sidetracked, the Silver Age origin is similarly really silly. Qatar Hol and Shiera Hol are alien police officers from the planet Thanagar, who've come to Earth because a shape-shifting thief has escaped here. The two of them then use special devices to learn all the necessary information about Earth, that they then use to then go to Earth, ring the police commissioner of the city's doorbell, tell him they're aliens, and he just says, "You know what? I believe you," and gives them cover identities as museum curators so they can comfortably live on Earth while searching for the criminal. Hawkman and Hawkgirl end up running into the shapeshifter several times until, on the third encounter, they manage to beat the shit out of him and put him in stasis jail. They then send him to Thanagar while deciding to stay on Earth to study Earth police methods. This story is just so incredibly funny and ridiculous, and it's not just because the story itself is absurd, but because of some tiny little details, like the Hawk people's smiles are so goofy when they have their masks on. They both have the ability to talk to birds. They also have all the powers of different birds, like Hawkman specifically says that he can dive just like a grebe. Oh, and he's also super into ancient Earth weaponry. Several times in the story he goes, "We should fight him using the blah 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 blah, used by the ancient yada 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 yada, because it's so great at gobble gobble gobble." And it is so incredibly endearing, like, oh my god, Hawkman, you should just make a podcast to talk about this shit. Like, anyway, moving on. Sidetracked again, I'm sorry, the Hawk people are just so funny. I would say that I really enjoyed both of these stories, but I think the Golden Age one just works better for me conceptually. This idea of reincarnation and ancient weapons and sorcery is incredibly fun and has lots of more potential than aliens coming to Earth and living on Earth. It's just, that's really played out, but I love the Golden Age origin. I think if I was a DC reader back in the 50s, I would have been pissed if I found out that they turned Hawkman into an alien police officer when he was like an ancient prince before, alright? So just add a point to the Golden Age for Hawkman. Alright, finally we have the Atom, and I'm just gonna give it to you straight up, man. The Golden Age Atom sucks compared to the Silver Age one. And I don't have much more to say. Like, you know how people who are, like, at least somewhat into comics are aware of Jay Garrick and Alan Scott? I swear to you, even some more well-read comic fans don't know who the hell Al Pratt is. Al Pratt is short and a coward and a loser, and he gets bullied all day, and his crush hates him, and he hates his life, but then he meets a homeless guy who used to be an ex-trainer, and lets him live in his dead grandpa's house in exchange for training him. Al ends up getting super ripped, saves his crush's life from kidnappers, and decides to become a superhero. It's the most bog standard shit ever. Even the collection I read it in talks about how much the Golden Age Atom was mainly just space filler for the book it was printed in. When the Silver Age came around and we got Ray Palmer, that's when the Atom became a real fucking superhero, man. He finds a chunk of white dwarf star that falls to Earth, uses it to make a shrink ray, and then uses it on himself despite the fact that everything he used it on before exploded. And when he doesn't explode, he just decides to keep using it on himself as a superhero. Ray Palmer is awesome, and there's no way I wasn't gonna pick him for this category, alright? Case closed. So, in conclusion, I actually came to some really balanced decisions. I thought the two Flashes were too similar to make a truly meaningful choice, that the two Green Lanterns both had incredible merits, that the Golden Age Hawkman was more interesting and unique, and that the Silver Age Atom blew his Golden Age counterpart out of the water. Overall, this was a super fun video to make. I just love exploring old comics, but I really want to end this video with a statement, which is that, hopefully, through this video, I showed the nuance in reboots and legacies, not just in comics, but in media as a whole. There are so many people out there who simply hate on things for being newer versions or replacements of something they like, without giving that new thing a fair shake. And yet these people love things like these Silver Age GC characters because they grew up with them, even though they're also replacements, and they would probably be pissed off if the old versions took permanent top bill of their newer versions, even though that's exactly what they want to happen to the characters they hate. On the flip side though, there are also people who blindly accept new things and don't accept constructive criticism or well-warranted criticism, despite the old stuff having better elements and more stories to tell. I just want people to have a more thorough examination of things, don't blindly hate new characters without giving them an honest chance, but also don't blindly love a new thing without giving the OGs some respect. That's just my take though, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments. It's been me, Z, and I'll see you on Thanagar. Bye.